Hey guys, it's Elena. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be showing you how to do French seams. This is such a beautiful technique. It makes any project look super professional and it's really not that hard. So I'm going to walk you through all the steps and you'll be a pro at French seams. So to start with your fabric, typically when you are sewing something together, you want to put your fabric right sides together so that when you sew along this edge and you flip it open, it would have a really nice look on the front, but the back would have all this raw edge exposed and might fray or just not look very nice. And so today we are going to solve that problem with French seams. So to start, instead of putting your fabric right sides together, you are actually going to put your fabric wrong sides together, which is basically how you want it to look in the end. I would want these soccer balls to be showing on the outside, and so that's how I'm going to start. I am lining up the edge that I want to sew, and I will just be pinning along here. And I'm not doing a lot. This is a pretty easy fabric, so I'm not going to put many pins. I'm just going to do 2, and then I'm going to sew along here. Now, one thing to keep in mind is your seam allowance. If I wanted to do a 1/2 inch seam allowance, which is where my little gauge is right now, and that's where I wanted to end, I need to adjust my first seam allowance accordingly. So basically what we're going to be doing is sewing along here, flipping it out, and then doing another seam, and we're going to want to enclose our raw edge inside. So because of that, we're going to double up on our seams, so we want to make sure that we're leaving enough room. So if I'm doing, just to keep it easy, a 1/2 inch total seam allowance, my first seam, I would want to do less than that. So I might do a 1/4 inch and then subtract that by my total seam allowance and get the seam allowance for my second seam. So right now, if I'm doing a total of a 1/2 inch seam allowance, I would start and do a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So here we are, I am at the sewing machine and I'm going to be lining my presser foot up to a 1/4 inch, which is basically at the end of my presser foot, maybe a little bit shorter. And I'm doing wrong sides together. So here we are, I have just done my straight stitch, my first straight stitch. I have done about a 1/4 inch, and it is time to go to the ironing board. So once you're at the ironing board, what we really want to do is to flip our piece to the outside and get a really nice crisp line and iron our seam to each side so that we can get things laying nice and flat. Once we have done that, this is nice and flat, so we are going to fold this right sides together finally and make sure that our seam is centered, and then iron this closed because this is where we're going to stitch next. So we've got this nice, crisp, centered seam. And now what we can do is pin this to make sure that this is staying in place. And then we are going to sew along here, which is our newly folded seam. And we're going to do another 1/4 inch seam allowance, maybe a little bit more, because we want to enclose our previous seam allowance. If you want, You can always go back and trim this down so that it's smaller, but the key is to sew along here so that when we flip it open, it's encased totally. So now I'm going to stitch along here. So here we have our French seam. It's all done. We have a beautiful enclosed raw edge on the inside, and then when you flip it open to see the outside, it looks perfect, just how it should. But on the inside, it has this really nice, professional, clean look. At this point, you can go iron it again to make sure that this seam is laying nice and flat. But this is such a good option if you're making something really professional, you want it to look really nice. This is such a good way to do it, and you're gonna get perfect results every time. You can do the exact same thing for other fabrics, so I'm going to go ahead and do the same exact steps but with my organza. With this, I am going to probably add a couple more pins just because this is really slippery. So here is the finished French seam. It looks amazing from the outside. It looks even better from the inside. It looks so incredible. The raw edges are completely enclosed. You can't see anything, and it looks even better with something that is sheer, like a nice, shiny, beautiful organza. The raw edges are totally enclosed. This is great for something like this because this frays like crazy. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and I have many more for you to check out. So I will see you in the next one.